Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the first Student-ECP webinar series, webinar of the year. So I am, I guess, your host and one of your moderators. I'm Brigitte, and hopefully you could see my screen okay. People are still going to be trickling in, so we'll let them do that, but in the interest of time, we'll get started. Again, I'm Brigitte. I'm a geologist at Patel working on CCUS projects, and I'm also the current Early Career Professional Board Representative for AIPG National. And the other moderator, Mark Schaff here, he is the treasurer of AIPG National, and he also works on environmental remediation projects for Kleinfelder. And so essentially, the objective of this and how this came about is, Mark and I worked together to develop these career-related webinars so that, along with the panelists, so that folks can be more aware of the networking opportunities that are out there, specifically the great, spectacular networking opportunities that AIPG has. And hopefully these webinars will help to move your career along and so that you could get ahead. So this webinar is titled Launching Your Geoscience Career. And this is geared a little bit more towards students, but not exclusively. It deals with the decisions that that general age group and that general early career professional has to decide in order to really develop their career at the very beginning. So essentially, we're going to be asking our great panelists, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, for 30 to 40 minutes. And then for the last, remaining time, we'll open it up for discussion. So I'm asking everybody to please put their questions in the chat or just wait to ask it at the end, please. So a little bit about our panelists. So first we have Edward Lowe, who is here today from Kentucky. So he has a PhD and is currently a postdoc at the University of Kentucky. We have Patrick Zapinski. So he is an ECP from the Missouri section and is a current lab manager for SCI Engineering. And we have joining us from the UK, Kayla. And so she has been working on her master's in engineering geology at the University of Leeds in England. And so I think she worked in industry for a little bit and it is now going back to grad school. So thanks so much for joining, and we'll get into the questions here. Okay. So one of the first questions that we'd like to kick off is, a very, very important one, which is about grad school. Lots of people have to make that decision of, do I go back to school and when? So this is a question more for Edward and I believe Kayla. So how did you folks go about the decision process to attend a graduate school, and how did or how can AIPG help with that?
I can go first, if that's okay.
Great. Yeah.
I decided to go back to graduate school because of all of the mentors that I received, specifically Mark Shaft, who's on this call. He said that the best geologist is the geologist that is exposed to the most most rocks in the world. And so I took the leap of faith and I decided to go to graduate school across the other side of the pond. And I think that was a great decision because, learning geology just in your area makes you a good geologist, but makes you a better geologist if you're exposed to different elements. Yeah, so that was how I made my decision. And also understanding that if I wanted to become better in what I wanted to focus on, and specifically engineering geology, I needed to go back to school. So that was how I made my decision.
Yeah, that's a
Great.
great
Yeah,
response.
yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to add to that in terms of I took a slightly different thought process. I knew I was geared towards earning a master's degree, master's of science degree at the time, but I also wanted to merge this with an international experience. So I went to undergrad at Louisiana State University, and I was looking to work on other wetlands, other places that where I could work on the sedimentary geology. And for me, I wanted to focus on the Pantanal, which is the world's largest freshwater wetland in Brazil. And then the mechanism for me to do that at the time was through the Fulbright scholarship. And so in my last year, as I was finishing up everything in my last semester, I was running through my undergraduate thesis and completing that, and also applying for the Fulbright. And at the time, I had a line of about five or six institutions for potentially for a master's degree, and then it came down to who was able to offer me the best support in order to do the project in Brazil, and even independent of the project Brazil, who could actually provide the experience that I was looking for in terms of a master's degree and connecting with industry. So I came to UK for my master's degree at the time, and I'm still here.
Nice. I'm sure they're happy to still have you, you know. Yeah, and it sounds like, you know, yeah, going to graduate school was and is important to both of you for, you know, expanding your, you know, geoscience toolkit and, you know, moving forward with, you know, what you want to achieve for your career. So yeah, that's great you guys made that decision.
Just a follow up to that, Kayla, you indicated that the AIPG played somewhat of a role. You and I had talked going back a few years in Sacramento. I think when you had finished your undergrad and you were working and trying to make that decision, and you did get in touch with AIPG. And Edward, you know more about AIPG and what they offer now. Looking back at some of your decisions, do you see that there could have been a place for AIPG to help with the decision making?
Um,
Yeah. Oh, I sorry. Were you talking to me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely think that AIPG definitely played a role in making my decision and providing that support and guidance in deciding which graduate school or what type of programs I should be looking out for in terms of not just my schooling, but also understanding how it can connect back into industry.
Yeah. And Edwards, what you know now, is there, if you had a do-over, would you incorporate AIPG a bit more in that process? Because it sounds like you got a lot of input from professors, from people running departments, reviewing applications, those kind of things. That was your primary source of guidance. Looking back, would you mix that up a bit more?
Yeah, certainly. I saw the opportunity to publish in like the professional geologist that I wish I'd made time to do. I think that would have been a really good experience. But also, you know, I'm taking the fundamentals of geology exam so late now, in part because you know, that's something that I could have done right as I was finishing up my undergrad. I think I would have been uh, not brushing up as much on all the topics that I am now looking back. So, but I'm signed up and ready to go.
Great. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. It is how important are professional connections when searching for your first geoscience career opportunity? So we're really looking for some input again on professional connections for your first geoscience career opportunity. And how do they or how can those professional connections help? Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'll gladly weigh in. Professional connections are really important because you are gaining the perspective of other people and learning about the pathways that they took in their own career. So what this does is it just provides you with ideas that you can use when forming your own career. For me personally, easily the biggest connection I've been able to maintain has been my undergraduate thesis advisor. I went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and did an honors undergrad thesis. And that advisor and I still stay in contact to this day. And she's been really instrumental with me planning out my career trajectory, which includes plans for grad school for next year. So I appreciate her input a lot because I know that she's seen a lot more on the career side as a geoscientist than I have. So her offering that wisdom and experience is definitely crucial. Definitely the other big one that I could plug is AIPG and other professional geoscience organizations. So I'm also a member of GSA, where I'm part of their mentoring group as well. And AIPG has their own mentoring program, which is fantastic. Mark will probably speak to that to a greater extent a little bit on, but it's totally free. It's no barriers to entry. All you have to do is you look on our the AIPG database for who is listed as a mentor, and then you just reach out, try and find somebody who is an expert or has a career in something that you find interesting. And then you can always pose them questions saying, hey, I see that you have experience in blank. I'm interested in this. What was it like? How did you acquire this? What did you do to achieve this level of experience? That just shows respect and interest, and people are receptive to that. So that's a great way to establish professional connections that you can use to help guide you as you start out your career as an early career professional.
Thanks, Patrick. And it is a good segue. So I'm going to just jump screens for a second here and just point out, I'm thinking, did I click the right buttons here? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the AIPG homepage, and the mentoring program's right down here on the second row. And as Patrick said, it's really simple. There's no forms to fill out or anything. It's just an active list of mentors, and it's this button here, and that pops open a spreadsheet in alphabetical order of, I don't know, maybe 50 to 75, no, maybe about 50 different mentors in here from all different backgrounds, different locations. Their states are located here. When you click on their name, there's more personal information provided, kind of about their key things like their email address. That's how you can initially get a hold of them, and where they went to school. Some people have more detail in these than others, and kind of talks a little about their philosophy on mentoring, some of their AIPG activities, the length of time that they've worked, and some of the things that they did. So if you're interested in kind of knowing more about hydrogeology, oil exploration, mining, engineering geology, you can look through this library of AIPG mentors and find somebody. Even on the homepage here, kind of talks a little bit about what their areas of specialization is, what they've focused on in their career, that kind of a thing. So it's a really easy, and there's no commitment. Everyone's sort of a temporary sponsor in the sense it can be a half an hour call. I always look at it as an opportunity. I certainly haven't done everything or know anything, close to everything. So my job is to try to find the best mentor for that person. I'm more than happy to talk with a mentee for 1 or 2 or 3 calls and identify what specifically their objective is. But, if it's about U.S. schools, having grown up in Canada and gone to school there, I might not be the right person. So I might refer you to somebody else that's gone to a grad school in a geography or specialization that you're interested in. And I'll just look through the mentoring list as well. And then, of course, I know other people that might not be a mentor, but might be perfect for an individual mentee to talk to. And I'll reach out to them to see if they're willing to have a discussion with somebody. So it's great from the standpoint that there's a huge diversity, again, in geography, specializations, years of experience, things like that. So again, it's really easy to use. It's pretty non-committal, but I think it's a great place to go. These people are all very interested in helping mentees too. So that's, they filled out the form. They want their name listed here. So every time I've reached out to one, unless they're really crazy busy or traveling, or, you just hit them at the wrong time when they're on vacation and you might have to wait a week or 2. But everyone listed here is sort of put up their hand and say, I'd love to help out and give back to the next generation of geologists to help find their way. So that's sort of the plug on the mentoring program from the homepage there. And I'll stop my share and see if there's anything else on that second question that anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, thanks so much. Oh, sorry, what was that?
I had more that I can share if we still need want to fill some more time on this one.
Yeah, I think we'll actually get moving on, but yeah, thanks for sharing your insights, and Mark, for sharing the mentorship program. Me and Mark know quite a few people on that list, and I'm sure the other panelists are familiar with some of those folks. So if you need advice on who to talk to, feel free to reach out, to us as well. But we'll get to the next question. So this is kind of delving a little bit more into the details on the resources that are available for students and ECPs, and more details on the resources that you actually used. So I think this is geared more for anybody, I believe, any of the panelists. But essentially, what AIPG resources helped you throughout your geoscience education to get to where you are today? Kayla, you could start us off if you'd like.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start off. Yeah, so I've enjoyed being part of AIPG in the resources that are readily available, not just for students, but those that are in their early careers. I found it extremely helpful. Going back to the mentorship program, I have about what's important to know is like you don't have to have just one mentor. You can have a couple of mentors. Yeah. And I do have a couple of mentors already that actively stay in touch with me, and they help me anywhere from helping me find resources just in my everyday studies and also in my career. So just the other day I was talking to Dave Adler about, what textbook should I be looking at to help me guide me along through my courses. And he happily sent me a gigantic list. And he also reviewed my resume to make sure that when I'm applying for these jobs, I know what I should be writing actually on my resume. And so I thought that was really helpful in the mentorship program. And then in terms of the annual student day that happens during the conference, the student day, there's presentations and mock interviews and lots of resources and presentations that happened there. Like this last year, we had, I believe, the CEO of Brunton come, and she did a presentation. I found that on how to use the different varieties of Bruntons. And also we had another presentation on the different apps that are readily available for students and those that are industry to use. And I found that also helpful.
Thanks, Kayla. I want to give a plug to Dave Adler. Just knowing Dave a little bit, he does have a lot of availability coming up, as today's is tomorrow, I think, is his first day of retirement. So I just wanted to give Dave a plug. He is a great guy, great resource. And he did help out big time up in Michigan at the IPG meeting a couple of years ago with student day and resume writing and interviewing skills and all those kind of things. And he's really approachable and got a ton of experience. So that's one name that's on the mentor list that definitely don't hesitate to reach out to Dave if anything grabs your attention and his background information. Patrick, Edward, any other things from AIPG perspective that might help?
Yeah, for me, AIPG was the window into industry. Like, as you all have noticed, I've been in academia for a long time, and this was often like the main way I could network with other people in my area who were doing that type of outreach that I enjoyed doing. So it was also an opportunity to really work with the local community in partnership with them. And in terms of getting involved with my local chapter, it was an opportunity to grow as in terms of my leadership skills through being an officer, and then eventually being the president of the local chapter. It offered me an opportunity to represent the chapter at the AIPG annual meeting. I think it was in Sacramento in 2021. So that was a really fun opportunity to go and talk and understand how AIPG and other people were at different levels of their career, and what would lay ahead of me in terms of what my options are. So that's really a great insight into industry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that's kind of what sets AIPG apart from some of the other organizations, like you said, because some of them don't have that plug into the industry and into so many different industries. and different employer types like AIPG does. So that's a really good point. Yeah. So I think we'll transition a little bit to a more pointed question on student experiences. So this is, I think, geared towards Edward, if you don't mind, on for internships. What should folks expect or not expect when they try and get their first internship, and once they get it, what should they expect?
So I see internships fall into largely two categories. Some are very research oriented, like the research experiences for undergraduates. I'll post a link to that. They're usually funded through the National Science Foundation, and they pay a reasonable stipend over the summer with housing. And the others are industry focused internships. So my experience has been mainly in the REUs, and you can expect about 10 to 12 weeks of a well-defined research project or question using the resources, and usually you're also with a cohort of about 10 other people. So it's a selective program, and different universities handle it differently, but they all allow you an opportunity to kind of think about, especially if you're pre-undergraduate thesis, how to design a question, learn new tools, whether that's in machine learning or classic tools such as sediment coring, lake coring, and then really seeing that all the way to the end, which results in the poster or public presentation with your cohort. And it's also an end product, a tangible product that you can then take to like the AIPG conferences or Geologic Society of America's conferences. The internships in industry, I think both of them, it's important to know that you need to apply early. Usually they start accepting applications in December and run through about early February. So the window is really short. And so you want to be looking for these around September, October, and just constantly kind of either subscribe to the newsletter where you can get updates on those. And then obviously also talking with your local AIPG, sometimes they know unpublished internship opportunities, and that's an even better way to get your foot in the door for working and getting real work experience that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like, whether you get an industry related internship or a more research based one, it sounds like it's either way, it's really beneficial towards, your future, whether you go into, research and academia versus not, because ultimately, every scientist still needs to learn how to, write reports, deal with, scientific questions and hypotheses. And yeah, and I will add, as a recent student myself, getting an internship, for example, every summer, if you can, is a huge benefit. And yeah, I don't think I'd be here today if I didn't get my internships, because again, whether it's industry related or not, you learn something from it and take away a lot of either soft or hard skills, probably both. So yeah, those are extremely important to get. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that too. Well, if you know me, I'm always going to be plugging the mentoring program. I got to emphasize that even that is a great way to look while you're a student to, again, look for people in your geography, see what companies they work for, see online what those companies do. Even if you're just working in a lab, crushing cones, doing repetitive lab-based sieve analysis, et cetera, for 2 or 3 months, that company's name and that job looks really good on a resume versus delivering sandwiches for Jimmy John's or working at the local golf course. So keep that in mind. That mentoring program can be for a lot of different things, and there's no harm in reaching out to half a dozen or a dozen mentors, especially in the geography that you're in, and seeing if they have any knowledge. It might not be through the company they're with, but each one of us have our own network of people that we might be able to put students in touch with for summer job opportunities. So that's another way of building that resume and getting some appropriate work experience prior to graduation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, like you said, I think, applying for internships doesn't necessarily start with the apply button. you know, it sounds like it starts, you know, before then with, you know, connecting with folks, shadowing, emailing, and being interested in that line of work. So yeah, it's a really great point.
And just keep in mind, if you get in touch with 5 or 10 people on the mentoring list, you're really networking with probably 75 to 150 geoscience professionals through all the networks of these people that are on the mentoring list that they have in terms of the people that they've worked with, worked for, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really an invaluable resource, unconnected to any specific school or company or even career direction. So there's a ton of value there. We'll move on to the next question, which is how to prepare and what to expect or not to expect with your first geoscience career opportunity. So we know that Patrick and Kayla and Edward, you might have some input towards the end, but the two of you can probably provide some insight on how those first early stage geoscience opportunities in the working world went for you, what they provided, and maybe what they didn't provide. Go ahead, Kayla.
Yeah, so I think it's important when you're going into industry to keep an open mind. You know, I went in and my first internship, I got an internship working for the city of Sacramento in traffic lights. And he said, how does that, you know, relevant to my everyday job and doing GIS? And I think realizing that, you know, how you may not like it then, but then understanding these skills that you're learning, like Bridget said, whether they're soft skills or hard skills, it comes into effect much later on in your career. And I think me going into government, I learned that was a little too slow for my taste. But then I learned, you know, maybe consulting is more for me. And in the consulting world, it's a lot more fast paced. And instead of in government, because it's slower, you aren't exposed to as many projects because the projects are a lot larger and take a little bit longer to go through the system. But understanding, you know, not just what the job is, but how you as a person can thrive in that certain work environment.
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah. Patrick, do you want to add?
Definitely. So if you have an internship with a company, that's a perfect place to start with applying for an actual job, either while you're a student or after you've been a student. Generally, with early career geoscientists, it's not uncommon for us to change jobs 2, 3, or 5 times, or once every 2 to 3 or 5 years. So all of that is going to change depending on where your life is. And early on in your career, your life is going to be going through a lot of changes. So it's very tempting to think that, oh, once you get a job, you're going to be there forever. But that is a logical fallacy that you have to break out of. There's a lot of opportunity out there. And the way you kind of prime yourself that is by acquiring skills and connections wherever you may be. So if you're Kayla and you're starting at an internship with traffic lights, what are the skills there that'll transfer to any other job potentially down the line? This is where, for me, what has helped a lot is developing a master resume, where I have a list of every single job I've ever done, and then kind of a list of my responsibilities, skills, and successes that I acquired at that job. And that is a list that I can always refer to. And then when I'm crafting an application to any specific job, I can pick and choose the most relevant skills from the master resume into a more tailored resume that's better suited for an application. This just shows that I'm well-rounded, that I've learned something from everywhere I've gone, and that I can continue to develop myself throughout my career, which is what a lot of companies want to see. They want to see you start here, but you're going to end here during your time with them. When we're starting out in our career, a lot of our jobs are going to be as technicians or assistants. So it's understood that we don't know everything specific about the job or about how the nature of it works. So my advice for students and early career professionals trying to gain their first job is always be curious, ask questions, and do your best to try and understand a wide array of different things related to the job. So this can mean stuff outside of just your normal responsibilities, It can mean who are the people that you work with or that you work for. So learning what they know is also going to serve you well. So that's establishing connections, and that is being willing to learn from other people. The other thing I'm going to make a plug for is gaining certifications and licenses, simply because that is a definite identifier that you have achieved competency in something. So the big one for us as geologists is going for your professional geologist license, which I know is not in every single state, but whatever the equivalent of that may be where you are, that is a marker of your competency and the amount of effort that you can put towards something. So that's going to help you stand out from a crowd the earlier on you try and pursue that.
Great share, Patrick. Thank you. The one thing I want to emphasize is you touched on is quite often, if not exclusively in geoscience, is that first job, you're really, if you think about it, you're either collecting or generating data. And as you said, find out what that data is used for. I'm kind of amazed with new hires coming out of school. Sure, it gets kind of repetitive. I'll use the word boring. It's just sort of the same, sampling of wells or doing soil borings with a hand auger over and over again for a week or 2 weeks or longer. And be inquisitive, as Patrick said. Ask where the data is going. If samples are being collected and going to the lab, ask, can I see the lab reports? What are we testing for? How's it being reported? How's the data being interpreted? It's amazing when those questions are asked, the people you're asking, their eyebrows are going to go up and go, it's fantastic that you're asking about that. Let me explain it to you, because they want you to know how important that data collection stage is and why that data is so important. And then once you understand how the data is being used, it becomes a little bit more interesting, without a doubt, versus just going through the motions of collecting the samples, putting them in a cooler, waiting for them to be picked up, or dropping them off at a lab. So be inquisitive is definitely a very, very important step in that early career opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Patrick, I also liked your comment on, having that license, or certification, I guess, for the geologist in training. That definitely, makes you more competitive, especially when landing, your first job or so. And yeah, I mean, I'm from Ohio. I live in Ohio and work there. And although we don't have that certification in the state of Ohio, I was still able to get it in PA, and now, it's online. So it's, you don't have to drive to Mechanicsburg or, wherever to take it anymore. And yeah, and it's better to take it, earlier than later, before you start to, forget some of that foundational geology that you learned in school. So I think we're on to the last question. So folks could start putting questions in the chat, or wait till the last question. But we wanted to delve into each of you and what made you choose your geoscience focus area as of now. So we have an engineering geologist, we have someone in environmental, and then someone in academia studying some paleo environmental research. So whoever wants to start us off can. Kayla, you've been popular to start us off, so feel free to delve into that a little bit more. We'd love to hear more about your decision.
Yeah, so I actually, my path wasn't always straight line. I feel like that's very common with us geologists, and we want to learn it all, and we just we don't know where to start. For me, I'm from California, and California is very hazard prone. And specifically, I have an interest in earthquakes. So, I came across the idea of I can be a geologist in earthquake engineering. And one of the other organizations that I participated in school was the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute. And I came across them and was participating in a student competition that looked at each team basically acted as if they were their own consulting company, and competed with 40 different universities all over the world. and had to put together a model that went onto an earthquake simulator. So, and I was in charge of looking at the geophysics, the geophysical data. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but my degree was in geology and geophysics. And so I found that quite interesting. And that's how I came into engineering geology, is by exposure through just other organizations, and also my curiosity of just natural hazards such as earthquakes and landslides. So yeah, that's how I came into it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Kayla.
that's
Edward, Patrick, anything else?
I can go next. The big thing I want to mention is my first job right out of undergrad. I was in Illinois, working there for almost a year, but it was in 2020. And at a certain point during that year, company went through a rough patch and I wound up being laid off for a couple months. I spent those months really delving into professional organizations, AIPG among them, doing as much as I can when everybody was still cooped up during the pandemic. I also took a whole bunch of online certifications through OSHA and MSHA, just trying to augment my skill set as much as I could while things were kind of uncertain about where I was going to end up going. And then sending job applications all across the country. So even though my home base was in Illinois, I was sending jobs to California, Pennsylvania, Texas, Alaska, and ultimately I wound up accepting an offer to come to St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I currently am. Been with this current company, SCI Engineering, for a year and a half now, and my role here is primarily in the lab. I'll mention that when you're examining different jobs as a geoscientist, try and see what is a breakdown between field time, lab time, and office time, because every single job is going to vary up the percentage that you're involved in any of those service lines. Right now, I'm almost entirely based in the lab with a little bit of field built into it. Other jobs may be primarily doing reporting and data analysis, and then occasionally helping in the lab. Both of those are still valid. It's all going to depend on what your skill set are and what you feel most confident and comfortable with. My current role here is primarily in the geotechnical and geophysics range, but I'm looking ahead to grad school right now because I've spent enough time working in industry to realize what I find very interesting and has good career potential as well. So I credit that to the years I spent out of school, gaining some practical experience working for different companies throughout the country right now, and then seeing boots on the ground, looking underground, behind drill rigs and whatnot, what it's like working as a geologist. So now I'm able to kind of cater my career path and my career interests towards what I've learned to really appreciate, having been working full-time throughout different kinds of geoscience jobs. So there's a lot going forward. I am still eager and I'm looking forward to see what the future brings to me. And I hope AIPG will be a part of that.
We absolutely will, Patrick. Thanks for that share. Michael Campbell shared, he had to leave a little bit ago, but he said something that resonates right directly with what you said. He said, I think one should spend a few years between bachelor's and graduate degrees in industry. And that worked out great for him. And that parallels to what you had just shared, Patrick. The one downside, as I tell people, is if you get too far out there and you keep saying next year, sometimes it doesn't happen. As I was talking with a recent mentee about that, you end up with a car loan, you meet a significant other, you relocate a couple times, and it just doesn't happen. So that's one thing to kind of keep track of is, where is my gut commitment to doing that graduate degree? I know it's important. I know I want to do it. I even know where I want to go. And sometimes it's the finances, sometimes it's the romances, but whatever the situation is, make sure that you don't wait too long and you keep talking to people about that commitment, because the more you share that commitment with others, the more you're likely to stick to it. So talk to others about that commitment, examine what the roadblocks are, but don't wait too long, because I've seen that people regretted not jumping right in when they could have or should have, and then ending up not having that graduate degree when they wanted to have it to rely on later in their career. Ed, anything to add?
Yeah, I bring a more personal story. I grew up with no geologists around me. I didn't really even think about geology until I went to Louisiana. But what I've always been thinking about the environment, and So when Hurricane Katrina struck, I remember that, and going to Louisiana brought that into greater focus for me. And so being in an environment that's in, the Mississippi River Delta, surrounded by these coastal wetlands, really pushed me in a direction towards sedimentary geology and just thinking about all the challenges of living with, but also all the wonderful benefits that that type of environment has brought to the US, to our world. So yeah, sometimes you just look backwards and you're like, okay, I've known all along what I've wanted to do. I just didn't pair it with what the career would look like.
Perfect. Thank you. Great share. Do we want to go to questions and answers, or is there any other last minute contributions? We do have a couple of questions in our webinar chat. Bridget, should we pivot to that? We have one from, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should pivot. Yeah.
Okay. So we have one from Hannah. Hannah says she's curious to know if AIPG offers programs and support for international students, international workers to get a foothold in the US to start a career in environmental, for example. And we have relationships with other organizations. In Europe, it's the European Federation of Geologists. And we're connected to other similar organizations around the globe through memorandums of understanding or other means and ways of connecting with similar organizations. So I would definitely first promote getting in contact with your local geography organization in sort of your home country and figuring out if they have support in terms of connections there. It really depends on employer by employer in terms of hiring and retaining non-US employees. So every company sort of has a different policy around that, different needs. I know that the company I work for that we've done that and we do that. So I guess it would be, and I think it's also a lot easier if the non-US individual is based in the US. I don't think that I know of have hired people to relocate them from overseas, from outside of the US. But I know that we've definitely hired non-US citizen employees to join Kleinfelder and help them work through the associated work visas, work permits, and things like that. But so in terms of trying to get a way to get over to the US and to be on the ground, that's probably the first step. But that's just my experience. And I don't know if anyone else can provide Hannah with some feedback in terms of how there might be opportunities for non-US geologists to find a career opportunity in the US. You can write in the chat or speak up, either way. Did you see? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I don't know if you mentioned earlier, Mark, but the mentorship program and also getting the CPG is a really good plug for being part of AIPG. You can get those mentors who then can sign off on your activeness within AIPG, and then you can apply for the CPG. And I think that's an important thing and a key thing in helping you to get across to the US. And here in the UK, the CPG is equivalent to a licensure over here. So I can for sure confirm that. Yeah, that's one way that you could do it. And you do need, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 or 2 CPGs to apply. Is that correct?
Yeah, you need a couple CPGs on the application. What I wanted to plug in there is I know that being a part of the executive committee for a few years, we've been focused on that. Our national office has been looking at making sure that we can go through the application process to become a CPG, even from schools outside of North America. So we do have CPG members. It's a little bit of a different process to verify the educational background. And then, of course, those individuals need to connect with existing CPGs to vouch for them. But I know that we do have international CPGs as a part of AIPG. And that's a great thought. And thank you for sharing that. That's one way to kind of get your foothold in, is being a certified professional geologist with AIPG would definitely be acknowledged as sort of having a connection to, again, to North America, to the US, in terms of trying to find that geoscience job stateside.
Can you also, for those that are on the call, Mark, can you clarify what is a CPG, and what does it mean to actually have a CPG?
Sure. The Certified Professional Geologist certification indicates that you've had like 8 to 10 years of professional experience, and that it's not just the experience. We want to have CPGs that are existing CPGs kind of vouch for the individual. They know the individual, that individual's either worked with them or alongside them, so that we have members that can again vouch and recommend an applicant for their CPG. So the educational background is also a really important component. There's been a lot of changes in sort of the last 10 to 15 years to geoscience programs around the globe, really. So we've also looked at that in terms of not wanting to disqualify people if they don't have the exact right courses, but there are some core curriculum geology courses that we want to make sure that, obviously, mineralogy, petrology, stratigraphy, on and on the list goes. So there's a long list of courses that we want to see in the individual's degree background. But those are probably the three main ones there. Again, the work experience, and an existing connection to CPGs.
And then there's also a difference between PG and CPG. So someone did ask a question. Gigi asked, how can you obtain a PG? So that's similar, but not exactly the same. It depends state by state. And so you could actually look up the requirements for the PG as well, by state. But for the PG, you have to get your geologist in training first. So I have that, Patrick has that, and it's a 4-hour test, very comprehensive. You have to study months for it. And then for the PG, you need, I think it's 5 years of experience, plus or minus. Your master's counts for a little bit of it. And then, again, people have to vouch for your working experience. And then you take another 4-hour exam for the PG.
And it's an important distinction that you become a PG state by state. Some states participate in the ASBOG, Association of State Boards of Geology program, and other states do not. Your CPG is a national designation, coast to coast, corner to corner. So you can use your CPG designation in any state. Now, some states require that you have the PG to sign and certify documents. So it can be considered, you got to do a little bit of research to kind of figure out, starting off in what state you're in, and see if it's an ASBOG state or not. But for non-ASBOG states, the CPG is generally recognized as that certification.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then the next question is from Macy. So this is directed towards Kayla. So Macy's also interested in geophysics and earthquakes. So would you say that your geoengineering focus helped you or will help you to find a job in your interested field? Or do you, usually work with geophysicists, or, will you without experience with the engineering component part of your degree?
Yeah, I found that having a geophysics background was super crucial, right? In working in industry, especially an engineering geologist, because it's very common that the engineering geologist will have to look at geophysics data, and it only makes you a stronger geologist when you already have that background. There are people out there that are willing to pay big buku bucks just to look at a downhole gamma geophysics survey. And that sounds really complicated when it comes out of my mouth, but you as a geophysicist probably know that that's not that complicated to look at. And like I said, if you are able to expose yourself to the geophysics, it will help you to be a better geologist in engineering all around.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like, you know, being a geophysicist and an engineering geologist, there is a lot of overlap to an extent, and it's very complementary, but they do seem pretty different. You know, when I work with geophysicists, they're just looking at, you know, reprocessed seismic data and, you know,
Yeah.
picking faults and pretty different career paths that deal with, you know, answering similar problems depending on
Definitely.
the topic. Yeah. Thanks.
We
Okay.
have another question from it says Suman, and Suman's asking if students with science data knowledge, how does that help maybe get them a job opportunity in the geology field? And I think it really ties back to the word geology. If that data science, data management system related to geology or geoscience data, that would be a big connection. But also it really hinges on having more than just a data science education and experience background. So knowing the data, how it's collected, what it's used for, what it means, really stems back to that geology, geoscience degree and education. So the two together, no doubt, there's a lot that can go a lot of different ways. Having a geology degree and data management skills, there's not too much we do today that in the geosciences, it doesn't involve data. So the two go hand in hand for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, data science is very important for all the, you know, subsurface and near surface type of data sets that we get. You know, terabytes of it. So yeah. Okay, and then I think we answered the CPG question from Hannah. And then thanks, Shauna, for providing that information. And then Gigi, where to start with certifications for environmental geology. So we already kind of went over, you know, you get your GIT, you get your PG, you could get your CPG. In terms of other detailed certifications, I'm not, I guess, an environmental person per se. I guess I'm more deep subsurface than anything. But I'll say from a high level, you might want to pick a role model or pick a person where you could see yourself being, and then kind of work back and say, okay, what certifications do they have? You know, what certifications do they recommend? And kind of work your way from there. But Mark and others, do you have other more specific insights?
I can weigh in right here.
Great.
I'm thinking that there are a bunch of other governmental bodies that provide certifications necessary for the nature of environmental work. Two of the main ones here in the United States are OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. Both of those do offer online certification courses that you can take. Granted, they do cost, sometimes they cost a lot, but a lot of times having some minimal certifications from those organizations are necessary if you're going to be working under environmental regulations, or if you're going to be handling potentially hazardous waste or other contaminants that require intense supervision and regulation. So see what your employer or what your university can actually help provide or help cover the cost for. Because one thing that's really helpful for geoscientists starting out is to acquire certifications where you don't have to pay for the entry fee. That's usually the case with the fundamentals, is where your university or your employer will actually help cover the cost of the exam or the certification course, provided that you actually then go ahead and complete it. So it can be useful to look into the different government agencies, and I'll plug OSHA and EPA, possibly even MSHA, which is the Mining Safety and Health Administration. Those are ones that are very common for geoscientists, especially with a lot of overlap into the environmental side of things.
And I'll just add to that with regard to the OSHA 40, if you want to go into environmental and you want to get a leg up on the competition, if you somehow through your parents, and you'll probably get reimbursed for this, but if you can find the time and get your OSHA 40 training and bring that to a table for an employer, even for a summer job, and they know they don't have to sit you down for 40 hours to do the environmental OSHA training course, and that you have that coming in, you're going to get a job offer, because that's sometimes the difference between, getting the offer and somebody else getting the offer. So look up OSHA 40, find a place where you can get that certification and training, and squeeze it in, if you can, before you send out your resumes. And that'll be something that definitely catches people's attention. So it's a little bit of a cost to that. And obviously it's a week of time. It's 40 hours of training. And I think 8 hours of it needs to be in person. So you might have to do a little research, but I'm telling you, it's one of those certifications that really can make a difference if that's the direction you want to go into environmental.
Yeah, I will say I got my OSHA 40 HAZWOPER training. It was a course offered through my grad school, so that it was, I guess, more or less free. So you could always look into, taking a course from a local university and, counting it as credit as well. See if you could go that route. But yeah, that is a competitive advantage for sure.
One last thing I just want to emphasize, they'll just take 30 seconds. David Asti and Edward Lowe both commented that it's something else to explore. It's just to get to know your personality traits in terms of how they're mapped out by some of these online surveys. One's the Myers-Briggs survey, and Edwards mentioned the Clifton Strengths survey. They're both in the chat there. But I think these are surveys you can pick up online, do them yourself. It'll just tell you a little bit about yourself in terms of, maybe I felt that way, but didn't want to acknowledge it, those kind of things. But it kind of puts you in a little bit of a personality box. You can ignore it, you can use it, you can laugh at it, but I think they're great ways to kind of explore what you might want to lean towards or not lean towards, depending on how accurate it is.
Yeah, absolutely. My company actually, we go through a culture training that involves that. So it is something important to keep in mind for work, absolutely, and working with others. So I think that's all the questions that we were asked. Mark, hopefully I didn't miss anybody. Yeah, so with that, I shared my screen with a few upcoming webinars and opportunities that you could read on the bottom. But again, special thanks to, our other moderator, Mark, for collaborating and being a part of this, as well as, Patrick, Kayla, and Edward. You guys are really great examples, and, you're doing pretty good. So, again, I left everybody's emails on the top here. So feel free to contact any of us if you have, follow-up questions. And thank you for everyone tuning in and, asking really great questions. And our next webinar is going to be on March 5th, which is a month from now, more or less, on Tuesday, I believe. And it's about advancing your geoscience career. So it's one step further from launching your geoscience career, and it's a little bit more focused on, what you do when you have your first job and, beyond. So make sure to stay tuned for that and share it. We'll be doing a Geo Careers panel in April. And of course, many of us will be attending the annual meeting in Durango, Colorado this year. I have a nice picture of Durango up there now. So, hope you could all join. There's even more opportunities for students and ECPs. So please take advantage of that. And, email me if you want to get more involved. Any other comments, Mark and others?
Just want to emphasize two things. Yeah, it's a little bit of a trip to get to Durango, but it's going to be well worth your while. It's a huge networking opportunity. So if you can make it in August, definitely go out there. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it. They're always a lot of fun. And the last thing is just the very bottom there. There's no sign up required in the mentoring program. All you have to do is send out an email and automatically, bam, your professional network will explode. So look into the AIPG mentoring program. There is no sign up. Just explore, send an email, and see where it goes. I can promise you it'll help with all the decision making that goes on at the early stages of your career, either coming out of school or looking for the next job.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much again, Mark, and everyone else. Thanks, Kayla, for spending your evening with us from the UK. And thank you so much. And we'll see hopefully everyone in a month for the next webinar. Thanks again.